Aryadeva says in his 400 verses, one of little merit does not even generate doubts about this teaching. But if they were to have even a doubt, they would shatter existence. So the Heart Sutra teaches an emptiness that is incredibly profound. And if one were to listen about this emptiness and contemplate it, one would accumulate vast collections of merit and collections of pristine wisdom. But generally speaking, a person of little merit, upon hearing about this profound emptiness, doesn't even generate doubts about it. They don't have the merit to even think in much depth, to wonder about it. But if they were to get to a point where they could even think about it to the point they doubt it and wonder, what is emptiness actually? What does that actually mean? By doing so, they would place the imprints for the destruction of their cyclic existence. So therefore, this emptiness that the Heart Sutra teaches is important for us to listen to, contemplate, and practice. So that being said, when we think about emptiness, often what appears to our mind, just because of the way we use the word empty in day to day, that how it is in our general vernacular in English, for example. When we think of the word empty, what appears to us is like an empty house, right? A room being empty, something like that. But that's not the emptiness that the Heart Sutra is referring to. The emptiness that the Heart Sutra is referring to is an emptiness of the object of negation, right? It is an emptiness of being established from one's own side, right? It is an emptiness in the sense that the object is a mere outward imputation of mind, right? So not being established by way of its own side is the emptiness that we need to appear to our minds when we say emptiness, and not this general understanding of emptiness that's in our vernacular. Let's take an easy example to illustrate this. Think of this I, this concept of I that we always have, right? Of this I that we consider so precious and very important. Now look for that I. Is this I in your head? Is it in your arms? Is it in your torso? Is it in your legs? When you look for it, finally, you do not find it. Although you do not find it, it still exists, right? Not finding something when you analyze it ultimately does not mean it doesn't exist. But the way it exists is simply a mere imputation onto the five aggregates, and therefore its conventionality is tenable. It's acceptable to say it exists conventionally. And the implication of it existing conventionally is that it does not exist from its own side, right? It's just outwardly imputed onto its basis. So back to the Heart Sutra. So far, we've looked at Shariputra's questions to Avalokiteshvara, wherein he asks how should the intended disciple of the Heart Sutra train in the profound perfection of wisdom, and Avalokiteshvara has answered by indicating how a disciple should train on the path of accumulation, preparation, seeing, and meditation. So, for example, on the path of seeing, Avalokiteshvara indicated the 8 profundities and how they are the objects realized by the path of seeing. And likewise, in the path of meditation, Avalokiteshvara has indicated that it is the emptinesses that exist with the 51 or 52 bases that are realized by the path of meditation. And now we are up to the passage where Avalokiteshvara indicates how the intended disciple trains in the perfection of wisdom utilizing the Vajra-like meditative stabilization. So we're in the passage a bit before the mantra. So although the Vajra-like meditative stabilization is still a path of meditation, It is the path of meditation that is the final moment on the path of a trainee. It is the direct antidote to the most subtle level of cognitive obscurations. So once it acts as that final antidote, in the second moment, one becomes an omniscient Buddha. And then, therefore, the text discusses the path of normal learning, which is the path of a Buddha. So Avalokiteshvara says in this passage, therefore, Shariputra, since bodhisattvas have no attainments. So here, when Avalokiteshvara says, therefore, he is indicating everything that he has said before relating to the emptiness of many different phenomena. So based on that, bodhisattvas too, those bodhisattvas who dwell on the 10th ground, right before Buddhahood, have no attainment, meaning they do not inherently attain Buddhahood. Their attainment of Buddhahood is conventional. Their attainment of Buddhahood does not exist from its own side, does not exist inherently, does not exist by way of its own character. So now we don't get a direct mention of the object of negation when we say there's no this, no that. Although it did come at the beginning of the Heart Sutra, where Avalokiteshvara sees that the five aggregates are empty of intrinsic existence, right? Where it explains his beholding the profound perfection of wisdom. So we get this explicit mention of what exactly the text means by no this or that right at the beginning, and we should apply that all the way through the text. So when the Heart Sutra says there's no form, no feelings, and so on, we shouldn't understand that according to our general convention of something not existing. We should always apply the object of negation to those, which is existence from its own side, inherent existence. So to continue in that passage, therefore, Shariputra, since bodhisattvas have no attainments, they rely on this perfection of wisdom and abide in it. So here, specific to this final training in the path of meditation, what it means is that they are in meditation on this perfection of wisdom, which is the meditative Vajra-like stabilization that realizes emptiness, right? And they rely on it and dwell in it, meaning they are single-pointedly concentrated upon this direct realization of emptiness. And to that awareness, there is no appearance of conventionality. There is only the appearance of emptiness. So to say a bit more about this Vajra-like concentration that acts as the direct antidote to the most subtle level of obscurations. It is the uninterrupted path of a sentient being in their at the end of their continuum. So there is a question of, since this mind exists in the mind of a sentient being, how does that then go on to the level of a Buddha, right? Because sentient beings and Buddhas have no common basis, so to speak. So does its continuum of its type go on, or merely the continuum of its substance, right? To use technical terms. And the commentaries would say it's the continuum of its type does not go to Buddhahood because it is a mind of a sentient being. It is only the continuum of its substance that reaches Buddhahood in the second moment. So, having no obscuration in their minds, they have no fear, the Heart Sutra says. So throughout the path of meditation, which exists throughout the 10 grounds of a bodhisattva, one is abandoning sequentially portions of the cognitive obscurations that need to be removed to achieve Buddhahood. So through this process, moving along the 10 grounds, one is accumulating vast collections of pristine wisdom. And by doing so and generating these direct antidotes to the cognitive obscurations and this Vajra-like meditative stabilization that is the direct antidote to the most subtle, by removing those, one is left without fear, right? One is left without a fear that would otherwise arise due to cognitive obscurations and the afflictions. Geshe says, this is, of course, the most brief of explanations. So one also needs to be aware that there are many different commentaries on the Heart Sutra, and they do differ with respect to this passage. So the way they interpret the next line, which is utterly going beyond error, is different. For example, first they would say having no obscurations in their minds refers to the absence of afflictive obscurations, right, which are different to cognitive obscurations. And they would say utterly going beyond error means going beyond cognitive obscurations. Other commentaries say that the error here refers to the apprehension of the unclean as clean, the suffering as happy, the impermanent as permanent, and so forth. So something a little bit more coarse. So despite their interpretations being different, one could say they also ultimately agree. There's no uh, great error in these different interpretations here. So when the Heart Sutra says, having no obscurations in their mind, they have no fear, some commentators understand this fear to be related to the fear of emptiness. So it's difficult to say that on the 10th ground, when one has generated this Vajra-like meditative stabilization, that there would be even room for the fear of emptiness at that point at such a high level. One would no longer fear it. Because in the second moment, one is a Buddha, right? I mean, these coarse fears are something at the level of a beginner. So how would a beginner, or why would a beginner fear emptiness? Well, actually, it's quite a normal emotion to experience when one first realizes emptiness. And there is a famous story regarding this in Pabongka Rinpoche's Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand, where he talks about the time when Tsongkhapa was giving instructions on the view at Sera Hermitage behind Lhasa. And Jitsen Sherab Sengye was in that audience, right? This famous master. And he realized emptiness based on Tsongkhapa's instructions. And when he did so, he became very afraid and he started touching his collar like he was trying to find himself again almost. And Je Rinpoche understood this, and it is said that he became very pleased when he saw this. What had happened is that Jitsen Sherab Sengye had realized emptiness and he had a sense of himself disappearing, and that's what made him afraid, right? That's what it means to be afraid of emptiness, right? And so in this fear, he tried to grab onto something conventional that exists, and that pleased Tsongkhapa to see it. But that's what happens on the level of a beginner, right? But here we're talking about the end of the path and the final moment of the path of meditation. So it's very, very difficult to say that such a fear would exist at that point. The Heart Sutra then says, and by going utterly beyond error, they will reach the end of nirvana. So here to reach the end of nirvana means to abandon afflictive and cognitive obscurations, right? To utterly destroy them. So here in this context of the intended disciple of the Heart Sutra who has this Vajra-like meditative stabilization in their mind stream, of course, in the second moment, they achieve Buddhahood. So what they have achieved are the qualities of realization and abandonment and non-abiding nirvana, which is Buddhahood. As for us, We are merely beginners who have just started to listen to and contemplate the Heart Sutra, right? This is way beyond our level. But at that time and up until now, there have been countless persons who have practiced the profound perfection of wisdom, who have contemplated and realized emptiness and achieved Buddhahood in this way. All the Buddhas, too, who abide in the three times attained the full awakening of unexcelled perfect enlightenment by relying on this profound perfection of wisdom. The Buddhas of the three time, past, present, and future, have, do, and will utilize this realization of emptiness, right? Which is what a profound perfection of wisdom is in this context, a realization of emptiness, in order to achieve Buddhahood. So, for example, the fourth of the 1,000 Buddhas of this eon in this world, Buddha Shakyamuni, he utilized the perfection of wisdom, realizing emptiness to achieve his full enlightenment. Likewise, the three that came before him, Kashyapa and so forth, utilized the perfection of wisdom, realizing emptiness in order to achieve their Buddhahood. And likewise, the fifth iteration, Maitreya, and all those who will follow will use the perfection of wisdom, realizing emptiness spoken of here in order to achieve Buddhahood. So it really drives home the point how important this realization of emptiness is in order to achieve our goal of emptiness. So this line talking about the Buddhas who achieve full awakening into perfect enlightenment by relying on this profound perfection of wisdom is indicating the quality of realization, right? The positive quality of what is attained. In the previous line, talking of having no obscurations in their mind, they reached the end of nirvana. It indicates the quality of abandonment, right? Talking about what one has eradicated. So from here on in the Heart Sutra, it talks about the mantra. So this section of the Heart Sutra is said to be catered towards the sharp, among the sharp faculty disciples. So generally the Heart Sutra in general being a perfection of wisdom sutra for Mahayana trainees, it is already considered to be catered or directed to sharp faculty disciples, but one must always remember among sharp faculty disciples, there's this division into the dull and the sharp. So up until now, where Avalokiteshvara has laid out the process of training from the path of accumulation right up to Buddhahood, it is implied that this is for the more dull disciples, right? They need it laid out for them. But here, this very pithy mantra is directed towards those sharp faculty disciples who don't need so much explanation. So reading on, therefore, one should know that the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unexcelled mantra, the mantra equal to the unequal, the mantra that quells suffering, is true because it is not deceptive, and so forth. So suddenly it would appear that we have gone from sutra to tantra, but that's not the case, right? Among sutra and tantric treatises in the canon, the Heart Sutra is considered a sutra, although some Indian commentators have categorized it also as a tantra. But that is not the general view. So here it talks of a mantra, and this is a bit of a point of debate in the commentaries. Here the word mantra, and mantra generally is understood to mean mind protection, right? The meaning etymology of this word takes man from manas to mean mind and tra to be the protective agent. So mind protection. And here mantra is not taken to be the mantra out of sutra and mantra, right? This general division of sutra and tantra. It's not that mantra. So for example, the Heart Sutra teaches the middle way path, right? This perfection of wisdom. And through that, one could say one is protecting one's mind from fear, right? The fear is, as mentioned before. And in that sense, there's room for talking about the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, right? That makes sense, doesn't it? So these statements are generally applied to the five paths. So therefore, one should know that the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, so here mantra of the perfection of wisdom is applied to the path of accumulation. The mantra of great knowledge is applied to the path of preparation. The unexcelled mantra to the path of seeing. The mantra equal to the unequaled is applied to the path of meditation. The mantra that quells all suffering, the path of no more learning. And then it concludes with is true because it is not deceptive. So meaning that emptiness is not deceptive. Emptiness exists in reality according to how it is seen by a direct realization of emptiness, right? Emptiness is true and is not deceptive. So Geshe has turned to Chokpa Lekshi's famous commentary on the Heart Sutra that is often used when explaining the sutra. And here he likewise applies these statements to the five paths. So where the Heart Sutra states the mantra of the perfection of wisdom in application to the path of accumulation, he speaks of this mantra or comments on it as the perfection by which one reaches the other side, right? That which takes one to the other side of cyclic existence. And the mantra of great knowledge in application to the path of preparation is indicative of the point on the path of preparation in which you realize emptiness through a meaning generality, right? A mental image. But one principally relies upon a a wisdom arisen from meditation, which is very close to a direct realization of emptiness. So that mental image starts to fall away as you get closer to the path of seeing, and therefore it is great knowledge. Then, with respect to the unexcelled mantra in application to the path of seeing, the path of seeing, on the path of seeing, one is utilizing direct realizations of emptiness as now, clear realizations. And therefore, there is nothing higher than a direct realization that one can utilize to get oneself to Buddhahood. So, in that sense, it is unexcelled. The mantra equal to the unequaled. So, the unequaled would refer to the qualities of a Buddha. And since this statement is applied to the path of meditation, it's applied to those bodhisattvas who are on the 10 grounds. And in the beginning, their qualities are unequaled with respect to sentient beings, ordinary beings who have not reached the 10 grounds. And eventually, they utilize this path of meditation to achieve the unequaled qualities of a Buddha, and they become equal to the unequaled in that sense. So that is what it's referring to here. And then the mantra that quells all suffering is applied to the path of no more learning, which is the state of Buddhahood. So once one reaches the state of Buddhahood, one has quelled all suffering, one has abandoned all afflictive and cognitive obscurations, right? One has pacified those sufferings, so to speak. So this mantra is true because it is not deceptive. So this mind protection, this direct realization of emptiness is true because it is not deceptive, because when you directly realize emptiness, all that appears is this ultimate truth. There are no appearances of conventional or otherwise translated as obscurities, like in the sense that they are veiled truths. So there's no appearance of the conventional or the veiled. And in that sense, there is no deception, right? So one can understand deception here as conventional truths. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is proclaimed. Tadyata gati gati paragati parasam gati bodhi swaha. In some iterations of this mantra, you'll find it without tadyata. Some you will find it with om. Here in this translation, there is no om, right? Some commentaries say that if there is swaha at the end of a mantra, there should be an om at its beginning. Generally, the syllable om itself is profound and important, so perhaps it would be better to include it here, because the syllable om is comprised of its components a, u, ma, which symbolize our body, speech, and mind, which are very important to bring into our practice. So, of course, starting a mantra with om is profound and good to do so. So it starts with tadyata, meaning it is so. And then gate, the first gate. So for this intended disciple of very sharp faculties, this first gati indicates to them the path of accumulation. So prior to the path of accumulation, one of course needs to give rise to thoughts of renunciation, and since it is a Mahayana practitioner, thoughts of compassion, great compassion. So such a person, this sharp faculty being, upon hearing this gati, is induced into the realization of the path of accumulation. Then the second gati is indicating the path of preparation. So that intended disciple, having entered the path of accumulation, meditates on the wisdoms realizing emptiness arisen from hearing and contemplation, and furthers those, cultivates those, and gives rise to a calm abiding that realizes emptiness. And upon doing so, that is when they achieve the path of preparation. Paragati, which means go to the far shore, here indicates the path of seeing. So that being who was on the path of preparation, who had developed a calm abiding, realizing emptiness, cultivates that until that realization becomes a direct realization of emptiness. So they are incited onto the path of seeing by this word, paragati, go to the far shore. So these are all imperatives, right? Inciting this disciple to do something. So they're incited onto the path of seeing with paragati, go to the far shore. So while one is on the path of seeing, one develops direct antidotes to the objects of abandonment of the path of seeing. But those are, of course, not enough. Abandoning those is not enough to achieve Buddhahood, right? These are only the intellectually acquired objects of abandonment among others. They are not the innate ones that are dealt with later. So then they are incited onto the path of meditation with parasamgati, go completely to the far shore, meaning go on to the path of meditation. And then the final incitation is bodhi swaha. So bodhi here is understood as full enlightenment, right? The state of omniscience. So from that parasam, this path of meditation, this being who has developed that final realization of that path, which is the Vajra-like meditative stabilization, they are incited to achieve Buddhahood. So swaha can be understood as likewise an imperative to establish yourself. Here, meaning establish yourself in bodhi, which is omniscience. Then it says, Shariputra, the bodhisattvas, the great beings, should train in the perfection of wisdom in this way. So this is the summary of everything that has come before, right? Wherein Avalokiteshvara has answered Shariputra's initial question and explained to him how to train and the manner or the realizations that are generated along the way from the path of accumulation all the way up to the path of no more learning. And then he concludes with this summary. That is how they should train in the perfection of wisdom. So here, train meaning to cultivate wisdoms arisen from listening, contemplation, and meditation again and again on this realization of emptiness. So thereupon the Blessed One arose from that meditative absorption and commended the holy Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva, the great being, saying, "This is excellent." So until now, the Buddha was displaying the aspect of being in meditative concentration and simply listening to the dialogue between Shariputra and Avalokiteshvara, right? From the explanation of the path of accumulation all the way up to the path of no more learning. So now he displays the aspect of arising from that absorption and commending or congratulating Avalokiteshvara on correctly elucidating the meaning of emptiness and so forth. So arising from that meditative absorption on emptiness, as we saw in the beginning of the Heart Sutra, he commends Avalokiteshvara and also Shariputra implicitly for asking the question, saying that this is excellent, excellent, O noble child, right? Son of good family. It is just so, it should be just so, indicating that it is exactly how Avalokiteshvara has explained it. And this is the part of the sutra that is speech from the Buddha's own mouth, whereas before it was technically the Buddha's word, but not from his own mouth. So where the Buddha says, "O noble child," it is just so that I believe could also be applied to Shariputra, right, who is also a son of good family. This need to say it is just so, it should be just so, is not without purpose, right? Everything the Buddha says is based on a reason. And here it is probably in order to dispel future doubts that this teaching does not have the Buddha's backing. So not only does he 100% agree with the words spoken, one should also take them even though they did not come from the Buddha's own mouth, and they came from Avalokiteshvara's mouth. For then even the Tathagatas, one must practice the profound perfection of wisdom just as you have revealed, for then even the Tathagatas will rejoice. So one must practice, meaning all those in future who are to come and to study this teaching should practice it just as you have said, which causes the Tathagatas to rejoice. So interestingly, in the next paragraph, the Buddha mentions Shariputra before Avalokiteshvara, right? In the sense of displaying a level of hierarchy. It says, as the Blessed One uttered these words, the Venerable Shariputra, the holy Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva great being, along with the entire assembly, and so on. So in terms of qualities and realizations, obviously Avalokiteshvara trumps Shariputra, at least in the aspects that they display here in this sutra. However, the reason that the Venerable Shariputra gets first mentioned here in this paragraph is because he is a fully ordained monk. And Avalokiteshvara here is a deity, a god. And gods cannot hold monastic vows. And therefore, in terms of Buddhist hierarchy, it is Venerable Shariputra who comes first. And that is also the reason in the Nidana, the setting of the scene at the beginning, that the assembly of monks are mentioned first, because Um, it is the Buddhist Sangha of ordained persons who are the ones who maintain the vows and therefore maintain the teachings, and much respect should be shown to them. As the Blessed One uttered these words, the Venerable Shariputra, the Holy Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Great Being, along with the entire assembly who was present there while the Buddha was in meditative absorption and then came out of it, essentially the whole world, including gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, all rejoiced and hailed what the Blessed One had said. So on Vulture's Peak, there was a great assembly present for this teaching, which includes those beings that we as humans could see and cannot see, including gods, asuras, Gandharvas, and so forth. So essentially, when it says the whole world rejoiced, it means the entire animate world, among the animate and inanimate. And in what manner did they rejoice and hail what was said? In the same manner that the Blessed One before praised Avalokiteshvara by saying, "Excellent, excellent."
mm,
The principal topic of this Heart Sutra is the view of dependent origination and the conduct of non-violence. What is this conduct of non-violence? It is the conduct of ethics among the three trainings. And the conduct of ethics among the three trainings is a conduct of body and speech, wherein you abandon harm to other people or other beings that would be carried out by harsh words or physical misconduct. And this conduct of nonviolence is derived from this view of dependent origination. There are three levels to dependent origination. You have the dependent origination of cause and effect. You have the dependent origination of parts, and you have the dependent origination of being dependently existent. So this emptiness taught within the Heart Sutra is the most subtle level of dependent origination, which is the mere nominal existence, the mere imputed existence, wherein something is empty from existing from its own side. There are many different levels of tenets within Buddhism. So, for example, those who hold less developed tenets, we could say, for example, the master Dignaga, he would principally posit the first level of dependent origination, which is of causality, of cause and effect, and therefore only posit it with respect to functioning things, right? Compounded phenomena, leaving aside permanent phenomena. However, according to the middle way consequentialist tenet system, one applies dependent origination toward all phenomena. And by extension, one could say that all three levels of dependent origination exist with all phenomena. That being said, it's difficult to posit the level of dependent origination of cause and effect with respect to permanent phenomena, right? And also, it is difficult to posit the level of dependent origination relating to things being dependent on their parts to permanent phenomena. The presentation of the dependent origination of causality is usually given in terms of an outer dependent origination and an inner dependent origination. The outer would be those things in the world like flowers being arisen from their causes. The inner level would be karmic causality, so a result of happiness arising from a virtuous karmic cause or a result of suffering result arising from its non-virtuous karmic cause. Then the next level is the dependent origination of things depending on their parts. So, for example, the I depending upon its parts, which are the five aggregates, right? The five aggregates are its basis of designation. In order to impute an I, one requires a collection of at least four aggregates, including the aggregate of feeling, consciousness, and so forth. And then likewise a table. Its level of dependent origination in which it is dependent upon its parts means that it's established based on the collection of its legs, the nails, the top, and so forth. And then we get to the final level of dependent origination in which things are explained to exist as mere imputations, merely nominally. And this level exists with all phenomena. And this is also the level of dependent origination that is being taught as the main topic of the Heart Sutra. When we say its topic is emptiness, we mean that its topic is this most subtle dependent origination. So this means that all objects are dependently existent. They exist merely nominally. They are outward imputations. They do not exist at all from their own side by merely an atom. However, they appear to do so to us. They appear to exist from their own side as independent, self-sufficient. But of course, that is not their reality. So thus concludes my explanation of the Heart Sutra. And of course, I cannot say to understand this topic very well at all. Although the Heart Sutra at first glance might appear to be quite abbreviated and a few words, of course, it's not easy at all, this topic. And Buddha Shakyamuni said again and again that emptiness is incredibly profound and difficult to grasp. So, in that sense, it is very, very hard to give an adequate explanation of it. What we can do from our side to help ourselves understand it, however, is to recite it frequently and also to try and meditate on its meaning. And in doing so, we will place good imprints that will eventually help us realize its meaning. So we are simply human beings, right? And we live in a normal human society. So what that means is that we are naturally prone to sometimes be happy, sometimes be sad, and we should recognize that that is totally normal. It's totally expected, right? When someone is born as a sentient being, what else would you expect? Until they achieve Buddhahood, they have to go through normal emotions and experiences. So uh, don't get, um, don't feel discouraged if you sometimes feel down about things. That's normal and to be expected. And just try to continue practicing Dharma to help your situation. One of the main qualities I like to emphasize as practitioners is this quality of fortitude or patience, sometimes also translated as acceptance, which I think is very apt. So, in that spirit, we should be willing to take on suffering or simply accept it. For example, if we are sick, don't dwell on the fact that you are sick and fall into despondency and despair. Go to a hospital and see people in much worse condition, and then reflect and see your situation in a different light. Sometimes it is good to compare one's level of suffering to that of others. So if we were the best of the best practitioners, right, a real practitioner of mind training, we would welcome suffering. We would welcome harm from others as an opportunity for us to further develop our patience and acceptance of suffering. Because without it, how could we ever do so, right? We need opportunities to train our mind to come to accept it. And this is clearly a quality that is said that should be developed. So I consider you all very high-level practitioners, right? But in being a high-level practitioner, of course, one still needs to progress further until one achieves Buddhahood. So keeping that in mind, please practice further and develop your qualities further. That's all I have to say, and I'd like to thank you all.